My daughter kicked me out of Christmas, so I gave her 30 days to leave my house. If you had told me 10 years ago that I would stand in my own doorway and be told I was not welcome, I would have laughed. Not because it was impossible, because I believed love protected you from that kind of humiliation. I was wrong. The first time I met Beatrice, she held my hand like it was something she had found on the bottom of her shoe. "Margaret, is it?" she said, her fingers cool and stiff. Her smile stretched too tight across teeth that were too white to be kind. "Emily tells us you were a librarian." How quaint. I smiled the way women like me are trained to smile. Polite, controlled, unthreatening. "Managing a city library involves more budgeting and community outreach than reading," I replied gently. "But yes, the books are a perk." She hummed. Not agreement. Not interest. Just dismissal. Throughout lunch she spoke about her summers in the Hamptons. About charity galas, where people wore diamonds heavy enough to bruise collarbones. About her disappointment that Jason had not become a neurosurgeon, like his uncle. She barely touched her eggs. Claimed she had a delicate constitution. Her eyes lingered on my plate. "You have a very hearty appetite," she observed as I finished. "I enjoy good food," I said. That was the first cut. Small, clean. Intentional. Emily squeezed my arm outside near the valet stand. "She liked you, Mom. I can tell." I looked into my daughter's hopeful face and swallowed the truth. Beatrice did not like me. She tolerated me, like background noise. Like weather you couldn't control. But a mother does not compete for her daughter's happiness. A mother in duress, so I paid for the wedding dress. $5,000 for silk and lace that made Emily look like a dream walking down the aisle. I sat in the second row while Beatrice hosted the reception at a country club, where every chandelier cost more than my first car. Jason thanked his parents in his speech. He thanked their unending support. He thanked the guests. He did not thank me. Emily blew me a kiss from the head table and mouth. "I love you." I told myself that was enough. It wasn't. A year later they came to my condo on a Sunday afternoon, looking like children who had broken something fragile. "Mom, we found a house," Emily said, her hands trembling with excitement. "In Bellevue. It's perfect, it has a yard and a nursery and everything." Jason stared at the floor. "The market is insane," he added. "We can't qualify without help." "How much?" I asked. $350,000 for the down payment and closing costs. The number hung in the air between us. It was my retirement fund. My safety net. The money Thomas and I had saved so that I would never depend on anyone. I looked at my daughter. At the dream in her eyes. "I'll do it," I said. "On one condition. The house stays in my name until you can refinance and pay me back." "Of course," Jason said too quickly. "There's a guest suite on the ground floor. It'll be your room, Mom." Always. Always. That word feels different when you're young. It feels permanent. It isn't. The first sign came 3 months after they moved in. I drove over with a lasagna. I still had a key. I wanted to surprise them. Beatrice was standing in the living room directing movers. "Shift it left," she commanded. "No, your other left." They were carrying in a massive gold mirror that looked like it belonged in a palace. "Oh, Margaret," she said when she saw me. "We didn't know you were coming." "I have a key," I said quietly. "Yes, well, we're redecorating." The feng shui was dreadful. My armchair was gone. The one from my old house. The one Thomas used to read in. "Where's the chair?" I asked. "In the garage," she replied breezily. It clashed with the aesthetic Jason and I are cultivating. Jason and I, not Jason and Emily. Not Jason and the woman who owned the house. I held up the lasagna. "I brought dinner." "That's sweet," she said, wrinkling her nose. "But I've ordered sushi from downtown. Jason needs to watch his cholesterol." I walked toward the guest suite. My room, the bed was gone. Boxes labeled, Beatrice. Winter wardrobe, were stacked against the wall. A stationary bike sat in the corner. Blueprints littered the desk. Emily stepped behind me. "It's temporary," she whispered. "This was supposed to be my room. It still is. Just storage for now. You have a hole upstairs," I said. Beatrice needed space. I nodded. I did not stay for sushi. The exclusions grew after that. Sunday dinners moved to Beatrice's estate because it was more elegant. Thanksgiving was relocated to Aspen. There isn't room, Emily told me on the phone. The chalet only has 4 bedrooms. 4 bedrooms, no space for the woman who paid for their roof. We'll do Christmas at the house, she promised. Hudge. On December 15th I received a text at 3 in the morning, change of plans. Beatrice wants something intimate this year. Just immediate family. We'll celebrate another time. Immediate family. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the message until the sun came up. That morning I did not go to water aerobics. I went to my attorney. If I wanted to sell, I asked. Oh, quickly could it be done? He looked at me for a long time. There's no coming back from that. They dropped the bomb first, I said. We listed it that afternoon, under market value, cash only, 30-day closing. An investment firm made an offer within 48 hours. I signed the papers on December 23rd. The wire transfer hit my account an hour later. $1.1 million. I had my money back. On Christmas Eve I wore red. Not festive, I wore red. When Jason opened the door holding a glass of scotch, his smile faltered. We weren't expecting you. I won't stay long, I said. I just have something to deliver. Beatrice rose from my sofa like a queen disturbed. This is a private family gathering, she said coolly. Private. I repeated, interesting word. Emily stepped toward me mortified. Mom, please don't cause a scene. I reached into my purse and handed Jason the envelope. What's this? Open it, he read. His face drained of color. She sold the house, he whispered. Beatrice laughed sharply. She can't, I said. And I did. Silence fell like glass shattering. You have 30 days, I continued calmly. The new owners take possession January 24th. You monster. Beatrice spat. On Christmas Eve. You uninvited me from Christmas, I replied. This is just paperwork. Emily stared at me as if she did not recognize my face. How could you? It was never your house, I said softly. It was mine, and I deserved respect inside it. I did not slam the door when I left. I closed it gently. Because even then, I was not cruel, I was finished. I drove until the lights of Bellevue blurred into streaks of gold and white behind the rain-streaked windshield. My hands were steady on the wheel. But inside my chest something was tearing loose, thread by thread, like fabric pulled too tight for too long. I did not go home immediately. I parked near the water where Thomas used to take me on summer evenings. The sky was heavy, swollen with more sleet. I turned off the engine and sat in the silence. For a long time, I told myself I was heartless. What kind of mother delivers an eviction notice on Christmas Eve? But another voice, quiet and newly awakened, asked a different question. What kind of daughter erases her mother from her own home? The phone began vibrating before I even pulled into my condo garage. Jason first. Then Emily. Then an unknown number I knew belonged to Beatrice. I let them all ring. Inside, I removed my earrings carefully and placed them in their velvet box. My reflection in the mirror looked different. Not younger. Not older. Just clearer. The next morning there were 14 voicemails. Jason's voice shook with outrage barely disguised as control. This is insane, Margaret. We can work this out. Call me. Beatrice did not bother with control. You vindictive woman. You will regret humiliating us like this. Emily's message was the hardest to hear. Mom, please. Please call me. I waited 3 days. 3 days of silence that felt like detox. Painful. Necessary. When I finally answered Emily's call, her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. We can fix this, she said immediately. Cancel the sale. Tell them it wasn't a mistake. You didn't mean it. I did. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, shallow and uneven. We have nowhere to go. You have 30 days, I said gently. That's more time than you gave me. That's not fair. No, I agreed. It isn't. She began to cry. Not loud dramatic sobs. Just quiet breaking. Why didn't you just tell me you were hurt? I tried, I said. When my chair went to the garage. When my room became storage. When holidays moved without me, I tried with my silence. You just didn't want to hear it. That's not true. You didn't want conflict with Beatrice. So you chose comfort. Her breathing steadied slowly. Jason says you've always resented his family. I never resented them. I replied. I resented disappearing. After that, there were no more calls for a while. January came down cold and gray. I heard through a mutual friend that Beatrice had offered to let them stay in her temporarily. Temporarily lasted 6 days. Apparently the renovations made it impossible. Or perhaps boundaries are uncomfortable when they live under your roof. On January 20th, they moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Renton, 30 minutes south. Modest, functionable. I did not help them pack. I did not drive by. I did not check the mailbox to see if they left a note. I let the wound breathe. The first month was the hardest. Grief does not knock politely. It sits at your kitchen table and stares at you while you drink your morning coffee. It climbs into your bed and presses against your ribs at night. I missed my daughter. I missed the version of her that used to crawl into my lap with scraped knees and whisper secrets. I did not miss the woman who looked at me like I was inconvenient. There is a difference. I joined a watercolor class because the brochure said, "New beginnings welcome." I painted terrible sunsets and lopsided flowers. The instructor told me I was too careful with my brushstrokes. Let it bleed, she said. Water finds its own shape. So I let color run past the lines. I rejoined the literacy center and helped adults sound out words that had intimidated them their whole lives. Watching someone read a full paragraph for the first time did something to my heart. It reminded me that growth begins with humiliation, then courage. 6 months passed before I saw Emily again. The letter arrived handwritten. Mom, I know I don't deserve 5 minutes, but I'm asking anyway. I miss you. I have news. I met her at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. She looked thinner, not unhealthy, just stripped of excess. Her hair was pulled back loosely. No diamonds. No designer bag, just tired honesty. She said, "Hello." For a moment neither of us moved. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry. I had imagined this moment 100 times. In some versions I forgave her instantly. In others I stayed cold. Reality felt quieter. I was wrong," she continued. "Not because we lost the house. Because I let someone treat you like you didn't matter." Tears welled in her eyes but did not fall. Living in the apartment, it's different. We budget. We argue about grocery lists. Jason does the dishes because there's no room for a second set in the sink. It's ours. No one rearranges it. I listened. Jason stood up to his mother. She added softly. He told her if she ever insulted you again she wouldn't see us. And she hasn't spoken to us since. There was no triumph in her voice. Just consequence. She reached into her bag and slid a grainy ultrasound photo across the table. "I'm 12 weeks. My breath caught. A girl." The image was abstract and miraculous all at once. "She's going to need a grandmother," Emily whispered. "Not a landlord. Not a bank, just you." I looked at my daughter. Not the bride in lace. Not the hostess in a big colonial house. Just a woman about to become a mother. "I would like that," I said. She exhaled as if she had been holding her breath for half a year. Rebuilding was not cinematic, it was slow. I did not offer money. She did not ask. I visited the apartment for the first time 2 months later. The living room was small enough that the couch nearly touched the opposite wall. The kitchen counters were laminate, the oven hummed loudly. Jason opened the door cautiously. "Margaret," he said, "not cold. Not warm, careful." "Jason." We stood there for a beat. "Thank you," he said finally. "For what you did." That surprised me. "For selling the house?" I asked. "For forcing us to grow up." He stepped aside. Dinner was spaghetti on mismatched plates. The sauce was too salty, the garlic bread slightly burnt. It was the best meal I'd had in years. Because no one commented on my appetite. No one adjusted the furniture. No one corrected my posture or my hair. We talked about daycare costs. About work deadlines. About the baby kicking at odd hours. When I stood to leave, Emily hugged me longer than necessary. "Stay," she whispered. Not tonight, I said. But soon. Sarah was born on a rainy April morning. Emily labored for 16 hours. Jason paced like a caged animal. I held her hand and wiped her forehead and whispered the same words I had when she was little and afraid of thunderstorms. I'm here. When they placed the baby in my arms, something inside me rearranged itself. Love returned. Not the desperate kind that empties you. The steady kind that stands beside you. 2 years have passed since that Christmas Eve. They still live in that apartment. They are saving for a house they can afford on their own. I help with Sarah 3 days a week. We read books on the worn couch. We bake cookies in the loud oven. She calls me grandma in a voice that feels like forgiveness. Beatrice has attempted to re-enter the picture. She sends expensive ones. Jason returns most of them. Boundaries are quieter than revenge. They last longer. Sometimes when I drive past Bellevue, I wonder about the house. It is now a corporate rental. Strangers live where my daughter once hung garland without me. I do not feel anger anymore. I feel clarity. Love is not sacrifice until you disappear. Love is not financing someone's comfort while they dismantle your dignity. Love requires boundaries. That Christmas Eve, when I handed over that envelope, I thought I was losing my daughter. In truth, I was losing the version of myself that believed endurance was the same thing as devotion. I had to close the door on a house to open the door to a home. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is say no. Even when your voice shakes, because only when you respect your own value will others learn to do the same. The first time Sarah wrapped her tiny fingers around mine, I understood something I hadn't when Emily was born. Love is instinct, but respect is taught. When Emily was a baby, I gave without measure. I stayed up through fevers, worked double shifts when Thomas was laid off, clipped coupons, skipped vacations, and never once kept score. I thought that was what good mothers did. You absorbed. You softened every hard edge before it reached your child. What I never understood was that if you soften every edge, your child never learns what sharp feels like. Sarah was different. Not because I loved her more, but because I loved myself too. Emily and Jason did not ask me for money after that first reconciliation. Not once. I noticed it immediately. Pride had replaced entitlement. They argued about budgets in whispers when I couldn't hear. They comparison shopped for diapers. They split a single streaming subscription instead of 5. Once, while washing bottles at their sink, I overheard Jason say quietly, "We can't afford that." It was such a simple sentence. But it was the sentence of an adult. Emily responded, "Then we don't buy it." No resentment. No expectation that someone else would step in. Just acceptance. That was new. Beatrice did not disappear entirely. Women like her do not retreat gracefully, they circle. At first it was lavish gifts shipped to the apartment. Designer baby clothes Sarah would outgrow in weeks, a gold bracelet with Sarah's birthstone, an offer to cover private preschool. Jason returned the bracelet. Emily donated the clothes. The preschool offer was declined with a polite email. The first time Beatrice called me directly after the eviction, I almost didn't answer. Curiosity won. "Margaret," she said coolly, as if we were discussing charity luncheon seating charts. "I believe this rift has gone on long enough." "This isn't a rift," I replied. "It's a boundary. You humiliated my son." "No. I corrected a misunderstanding." She inhaled sharply. "You fractured this family." "I didn't fracture anything that wasn't already cracked." There was a pause. There was feel very righteous. "I feel peaceful," I said. That seemed to unsettle her more than anger would have. She tried another tactic months later. Showing up unannounced at the apartment. Emily called me afterward, shaken. She criticized the kitchen, she said. Said it was temporary living. Told Jason he could do better. "And what did you say?" I asked. "I told her this is our home. And if she couldn't respect it, she could leave." "Did she?" "Yes." That was groanful. Hard-earned real. On Sarah's first birthday, we held the party at a public park. Paper plates, homemade cupcakes, a plastic table that kept lifting in the wind. Beatrice was not invited. When I arrived with balloons, Emily hugged me tightly. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I wouldn't miss it." I watched as Jason lifted Sarah high into the air and she squealed with unfiltered joy. There were no crystal serving trays, no curated guest list, no tension about who was sitting where. Just grass stains and laughter. Later that evening, as I helped pack leftover Kempleeks into foil, Emily said quietly, "Mom, I used to think stability meant comfort. Big house, fancy dinners, appearances, and now I think stability means knowing no one can pull the rug out from under you because you built the floor yourself." I swallowed. That's a hard lesson. I deserved it. "No," I said gently. "You needed it. There's a difference." One rainy afternoon when Sarah was almost 2, she fell while running across the apartment living room. It wasn't a bad fall, but she startled herself more than anything. Emily rushed forward instinctively. I watched carefully. Emily paused just before scooping her up. "It's okay," she told Sarah softly. That happens. Get up." Sarah sniffled, then pushed herself to her feet. No panic, no dramatic rescue. Just encouragement. I caught Emily's eye. She understood strength is built in small moments, not just dramatic ones. Jason and I developed a cautious but genuine respect over time. One evening after dinner, while Emily bathed Sarah, he lingered at the table. "I was angry at you," he admitted. "I know. I thought you were cruel. I wasn't trying to be kind." He nodded. "But you were right. That doesn't make it easy." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." He stared at his hands for a moment. "My mother always solved problems with money. I never learned how to solve them any other way. When you sold the house, I felt exposed. Like I didn't know how to function. Now I do." That was the closest thing to gratitude he had ever offered. It was enough. Sometimes I think about that Christmas Eve, and how different it could have been if I had simply swallowed the insult again. If I had said, "It's okay, maybe next year." If I had allowed my own erasure to continue quietly. Emily might still be living in that big colonial house. Beatrice would still rearrange furniture. My guest room would still be storage. And I would still be waiting for an invitation to my own life. Instead, something changed, not just in them. In me. I began traveling again, small trips at first. A weekend to the coast. A train ride north to visit an old college friend. I stopped asking permission from invisible judges in my mind. I bought new curtains for my condo. I framed my watercolor paintings, even the imperfect ones. I laughed louder. Independence is not loneliness. I had confused the two for years. One evening, while Sarah colored at the coffee table, she looked up and said, "Grandma, this your house?" "Yes." She considered that. "Mommy house small?" "It is." She nodded thoughtfully. "But happy. Children understand what adults complicate." The first time Beatrice saw me after everything shifted was at a mutual acquaintance's anniversary party. A neutral location. Polished. She approached cautiously. "Margaret," she said, offering a tight smile. "Beatrice." We stood there, two women who had once fought without raising our voices. "You look well," she observed. "I am. I hear Sarah's thriving." "She is." A beat of silence. "You always were resilient," she said finally. It wasn't an apology. But it was an acknowledgement. "That's kind of you," I replied. We would never be friends. But we were no longer at war. Power dynamics change when dependency disappears. Emily and Jason eventually bought a small townhouse 3 years later. Not in Bellevue, not glamorous. But theirs. They did it without my money. The day they closed, Emily handed me a key. "For visits," she said. I held it in my palm. Not ownership, invitation. That key weighed less than the one I had once carried for the big colonial house. But it meant more. On the first Christmas in their new place, Emily insisted I help decorate. We hung ornaments together. Sarah placed them all on one branch, and we let her. There was no guest list debate. No exclusion text at 3 in the morning. Just family. Real family. As we sat around their modest dining table, Jason raised his glass. "To lessons learned the hard way," he said. Emily reached for my hand under the table and to second chances. I looked around the room. At the small tree. At the uneven garland. At my granddaughter trying to steal frosting off a cupcake. I'll drink to that, I said. Sometimes people ask me if I regret selling that house. If I feel guilty, if I wish I had handled it differently. The truth is complicated, it hurt, it fractured something. It forced distance that might not have existed otherwise. But it also forced growth. In me. Love without boundaries is just self-destruction dressed up as devotion. And I will never again confuse the two. That Christmas Eve, when my daughter told me I was embarrassing her, I thought my heart would shatter beyond repair. Instead, it rebuilt itself stronger. Not harder. Stronger. There is a difference. And now, when Sarah runs into my arms and says, "Grandma here," with absolute certainty, I know something with quiet clarity. Respect given freely feels better than comfort purchased. And a home built on humility will always outlast a house built on pride. The year Sarah turned 4, she asked me a question that caught me off guard. We were sitting on the floor of my condo, building a crooked tower out of wooden blocks. She liked to make them impossibly tall and then gasp dramatically when they fell. "Grandma," she said, balancing a red block on top of a blue one. "Why we don't go to the big house anymore? Children remember more than we think." I studied her small face. Curious, innocent, no bitterness attached to the question. "Because that house wasn't really ours," I said gently. "But Mommy lived there." "She did, then why not ours?" I smiled softly. Sometimes you can live somewhere, and it still doesn't belong to you. Belonging isn't about walls. It's about how people treat you inside them. She considered that in the serious way only children can. "People be nice in house," she declared. "Yes. I should." The tower collapsed, she laughed, and the moment passed. But the truth lingered. Belonging. For so long I had tried to earn it through sacrifice. When Thomas was alive, we built everything together. It wasn't flashy, but it was solid. He used to say, "We may not have marble floors, Maggie, but we've got good bones." After he died, I poured myself into Emily. Into making sure she never felt the financial insecurity we once had. I see now that I overcorrected. Security without responsibility breeds fragility. And fragility cracks under pressure. The next real test came when Jason lost his job. It happened suddenly: corporate restructuring, budget cuts, polite email at 9 a.m. Security badge deactivated by noon. Emily called me that afternoon. "Mom," she said, her voice steady but thin, "Jason got laid off." "I'm sorry," I replied. "How is he?" "Angry, embarrassed." "That's normal." There was a pause. "We'll be okay," she added quickly. "We have savings." She said it almost defensively, as if bracing for me to offer a check. "I know you will," I said. And I meant it. Jason came over 2 days later alone. He sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. "I keep thinking I should have provided more," he said quietly. "Provided?" I replied. "A home, stability, growth. That was because you forced us to stand on our own." "I didn't force you," I said gently. "I stopped carrying you." He looked up at that. "There's a subtle difference between the two. One is punishment. The other, ask you for money," he said. "I wouldn't give it," I answered. He almost smiled. "Good." He found work 3 months later. Not as prestigious, not as high-paying, but stable. During those months, I watched something change in him. He cooked more. Spent afternoons at the park with Sarah. Repaired a leaky faucet himself instead of calling maintenance. Learned how to fix things instead of outsource them. Adversity can either fracture you or fortify you. This time, it fortified. Beatrice attempted to intervene during that period, of course. She called Emily with an offer to bridge the gap financially. Emily declined. "I won't put us back in that position," she told her mother-in-law. "What position?" Beatrice had asked sharply. "The one where we owe someone our dignity." When Emily told me that conversation, I felt something settle deep in my chest. That was the moment I knew she truly understood. Years passed in quiet growth. Sarah started kindergarten. On her first day, she wore a backpack nearly half her size, and held both her parents' hands as they walked her to the classroom. I stood a few feet behind them. Not leading, not financing, just present. When she waved before going inside, she waved at all three of us equally. That balance mattered more than any deed I had ever signed. Emily and I had our own reckoned evening after Sarah was asleep. We were sitting on her townhouse patio, string lights glowing faintly overhead. "Do you ever hate me?" she asked suddenly. The question startled me. Hate you? For how I treated you? For letting it happen? I took a long breath. I hated the behavior, I said honestly. Not you. She stared at her hands. I was afraid, she admitted. Afraid that if I pushed back against Beatrice, Jason would resent me. Afraid that if I chose you publicly, I'd be choosing sides. You were choosing comfort, I said softly. Comfort over confrontation. Less. And that's human, I added. But it's not leadership. She looked up at that. You were leading a new family. Leadership means protecting it from toxic influence, even if that influence is powerful. Emily nodded slowly. I didn't know how. You do now. She swallowed. Do you forgive me? Forgiveness is not a single moment, it's a series of small releases. I forgave you the day you showed up at that coffee shop, I said. The rest has been rebuilding trust. Are we there? Almost. Honesty without cruelty, that's what maturity looks like. The true closing of the wound came unexpectedly. One autumn afternoon, Beatrice requested to meet me. Alone. I considered declining. Curiosity won again. We met at a quiet restaurant. Neutral ground, no family, no audience. She looked older, not physically but energetically. As if the constant need to control had finally exhausted her. I owe you something, she said after we ordered tea. I waited. I underestimated you. That's not an apology, I replied calmly. Her lips pressed thin. No, she admitted. Silence stretched between us. You took something from me, she continued. What was that? Influence. I almost laughed. You had influence because they were dependent, I said. That's not the same as respect. She flinched at that. You think I don't love my son? She asked sharply. I think you love control. She inhaled slowly. And you? She challenged. You sold your own daughter's house. I sold my house, I corrected. To save my relationship with my daughter. Her eyes narrowed slightly. It nearly destroyed it. Less. Is it worth the risk? I thought about Sarah, about the townhouse key in my purse. About spaghetti on mismatched plates. About Emily standing up to her in that tiny apartment. Yes, I said. For once she had no immediate rebuttal. Before we left, she said something unexpected. You forced them to grow up. I forced myself to stop shrinking, I replied. That was the truer statement. Time softens sharp memories. Now, when I think back to that Christmas Eve, I don't feel adrenaline or rage. I remember the smell of pine. The weight of the envelope. The look on Emily's face when she realized actions have consequences. But I also remember the first coffee after reconciliation. The ultrasound picture. The townhouse key. Pain was the doorway. Growth was the house. Sometimes I wonder what lesson Sarah will carry from all this. Perhaps none consciously. But she will grow up watching parents who budget instead of borrow pride. She will see a grandmother who loves fiercely, but does not finance disrespect. She will learn that generosity is beautiful, but only when paired with boundaries. And maybe one day, if she ever stands in a doorway feeling small, she will remember that she has the right to step back, close it gently, and choose herself, not with cruelty, not with vengeance, but with clarity. And that is the inheritance I am proudest to leave. There is a quiet that comes after a storm that feels almost sacred. Not empty, not lonely. Just still. That is what my life feels like now. Not dramatic. Not glittering. Not headline-worthy. Still. But it took one final reckoning before that stillness truly settled. It happened the winter Sarah turned 6. Emily called me one evening, her voice tight. Mom, can you come over? Of course. When I arrived, the townhouse felt heavy. Jason was pacing. Emily sat at the kitchen table, hands clasped tightly. Wrong? I asked. Emily slid an envelope toward me. It was from a law firm. Beatrice's law firm. Inside was a formal letter outlining the establishment of a trust for Sarah. A very large trust. The language was polished, airtight, and unmistakably strategic. The condition was subtle but clear, structured involvement and oversight by Beatrice as trustee. Control disguised as generosity. She says it's for Sarah's future, Emily said quietly. Jason stopped pacing. It's a lot of money. I read the letter carefully. I'm not part of this decision, I said slowly. But I can tell you what this is. What? Jason asked. Leverage. Silence filled the room. Emily's eyes welled. She wants access again, she whispered. Yes. Jason ran a hand through his hair. College would be paid for, opportunities. Security. Security tied to conditions. I replied. Emily looked at me with something different in her eyes now. Not dependency. Discernment. What would you do? She asked. I took a deep breath. I would ask myself whether I want my child's future funded by someone who believes money equals authority. Jason stared at the envelope. We worked so hard to get out from under that, he said. Yes, I agreed, you did. Emily wiped her tears. I don't want Sarah growing up thinking love is transactional. There it was, the lesson complete. They declined the trust. Politely, firmly, without hostility. Beatrice did not respond. Months passed. Then one afternoon, Sarah came home from school with a drawing assignment. My family tree. She sat at the kitchen table coloring carefully. I watched as she drew 3 large branches. One for Mommy, one for Daddy, one for Grandma. She added Beatrice too. But smaller. Off to the side, connected but not central. Children map truth instinctively. Later that night, Emily showed me the drawing. She sees you as one of her roots, she said softly. I touched the paper gently. Roots don't have to be loud, I replied, they just have to hold. That spring, something else happened. Beatrice fell ill. Not catastrophically, but enough to remind her of mortality. Jason visited her alone at first. Then with Emily. Eventually, they asked if I would come. I hesitated. Not out of anger. Out of reflection. In the hospital room, Beatrice looked smaller somehow. The sharpness in her eyes dulled by fatigue. Margaret. She said weakly when I entered. Beatrice. We stood there for a moment. History hovering between us like a fourth presence. I suppose I owe you more than I've given, she murmured. You owe me nothing. I replied evenly. We both made choices. She looked at Sarah, who was coloring quietly in the corner. I wanted to secure her future, she said. And you thought control would do that. Her lips twitched faintly. I thought money solved most things. It solves comfort, I said, not character. She closed her eyes briefly. You're very certain. I'm very experienced. There was no venom in it, just truth. Before we left, she reached for Sarah's hand. Be good, she whispered. I am good, Sarah replied proudly. We all smiled at that. Life has a way of humbling everyone eventually. Years moved gently after that. No more dramatic confrontations. No more legal documents. Just birthdays, school recitals, quiet dinners, occasional disagreements handled like adults instead of weapons. One evening, when Sarah was 8, she asked to hear the story. The Christmas story, she clarified. I exchanged a glance with Emily. What do you know about it? I asked carefully. That there was a house and then not a house. Children distill complexity into poetry. Emily nodded at me, so I told it. Not with anger. Not with accusation. But as a lesson. There was a time, I said softly, when we all forgot that being family means treating each other with respect. So we had to learn the hard way. Did you fight? Sarah asked. We disagreed. Were you mad? Yes. I looked at Emily. No, I said honestly. Because we learned. Sarah considered that. So it was good. I smiled gently. It was painful, but it helped us grow. She seemed satisfied with that. Children accept growth as natural. Adults resist it. That night, after Sarah went to bed, Emily sat beside me on the couch. I'm grateful you didn't stay small, she said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. Small. If you had kept swallowing everything, I might never have seen what I was becoming. I reached for her hand. And if you hadn't been willing to lose me for a while, I might never have found myself. We sat there in comfortable silence. There is something profound about loving someone without needing to rescue them. without needing to control them, without needing to prove anything. Just presence. Just choice. If I could go back to that moment, the doorway, the envelope, the shocked faces, I would still walk in wearing red. I would still hand over the notice. Not because I enjoy consequences, but because that was the moment I chose myself. And in choosing myself, I gave my daughter the opportunity to choose maturity. You cannot demand respect while modeling self-erasure. You cannot teach boundaries while tolerating violation. Sometimes love looks like comfort. Sometimes love looks like distance. And sometimes love looks like 30 days' notice. Now, when I sit at their dining table, larger now, sturdier, I don't feel like a guest. I feel invited. There's a difference. And every Christmas since, we decorate together. No one is excluded. No one is tolerated. We are simply there. Together. Not because money binds us. Not because pride demands it, but because respect built it. And that foundation doesn't crack easily. The house in Bellevue is long forgotten. But the home we rebuilt, brick by boundary, room by responsibility, that one stands strong. And it always will. There was one more Christmas that tested us. It came quietly, without warning, the way most important moments do. Sarah was 9 that year. Old enough to understand tone. Old enough to sense undercurrents. Beatrice had recovered physically, but something about her had softened permanently. Illness has a way of stripping performance from a person. What remains is closer to truth. 2 weeks before Christmas, Emily called me. She invited us, she said carefully. To what? To host Christmas at her house. I let the silence stretch. And I asked. I don't know what to do. There it was again. The fork in the road. The same season. A different test. Why is she inviting you? I asked gently. She said she misses having everyone together. She said life is short. And how does she say it? Emily hesitated. Not commanding, just quiet. That mattered. Do you want to go? I asked. I don't want to undo everything we built. Then don't. It's not that simple. No. It never is. That evening, Jason called me separately. I won't put you in a position where you feel excluded again, he said firmly. I appreciate that. If we go together. Or we don't go. There was strength in that sentence. I won't be the reason you avoid reconciliation, I told him. This isn't about avoiding, he replied. It's about protecting. That word settled warmly in my chest. Protecting. For so long, I had tried to protect Emily from discomfort. Now she was protecting me from disrespect. Growth is rarely symmetrical, but when it aligns, it's powerful. A week later, Emily came over with a proposal. We'll go, she said. But we set boundaries in advance. What kind? No commentary on finances. No criticism of our home. No passive remarks about how things used to be. And if she crosses those lines, we'll leave. Simple, clear, adult. On Christmas Eve, we drove to Beatrice's house together. The same grand entryway. The same chandelier. The same polished floors that once made me feel underdressed in my own skin. But I felt different walking in this time. Not smaller, not defensive. Just steady. Beatrice greeted us at the door. Margaret, she said softly. Beatrice. No icy handshake. No marble grip, just acknowledgement. Dinner was formal but restrained. No theatrical hosting. No subtle jabs. At one point, she began to comment on the school district near their townhouse, her tone edging toward critique. Jason set his fork down gently. Mum, he said calmly, we're happy where we are. A beat, then Beatrice nodded, of course, and moved on. It was small. But it was monumental. After dessert, Sarah wandered into the living room and began examining the enormous Christmas tree. Grandma, she said to Beatrice. We put our tree up together every year. Mommy and Daddy and other grandma. She turned to me and smiled. We hang ornaments you bring. Beatrice looked at me. Not threatened. Just observing. That sounds lovely, she said to Sarah. And for the first time I believed she meant it. Later that evening, while the others cleared dishes, Beatrice and I found ourselves alone near the fireplace. You were right, she said quietly. I didn't ask about what. I mistook provision for parenting. I held her gaze. And I mistook endurance for love, I replied. We stood there, two women who had battled without shouting. You didn't break them, she added after a moment. You strengthened them. I strengthened myself, I corrected gently. They followed. She studied the fire. I don't know how to do that, she admitted softly. Then stop leading with money, I said. Lead with humility. She let out a faint breath that might have been a laugh. That's not my strongest skill. It can be learned. The rest of the evening passed without incident. When we left, there were no sharp words. No icy stares. Just polite goodbyes. In the car, Emily exhaled deeply. That was okay. It was, Jason agreed. Sarah yawned from the back seat. Everybody nice, she murmured sleepily. Yes. Everybody nice. Not perfect, not transformed into saints. But accountable, and that was enough. Years continue to move forward. Sarah is 12 now. Taller, wiser, fiercely observant. Last month she asked me, Grandma, what's the bravest thing you ever did? I thought about many possibilities. Widowhood, starting over. Raising a child alone for years. But none of those were the answer. I said no. I told her. She frowned slightly. That's brave. Sometimes, I said, it's the bravest word you can say. She nodded slowly. I said no to a friend who wanted me to copy her homework. She offered proudly, I smiled. There you go. Courage scales at every age. Sometimes it's an eviction notice. Sometimes it's a homework assignment. The core is the same, self-respect. Looking back now, I see that Christmas Eve not as a war, but as a boundary line drawn in snow, clear, cold, necessary. Without it, we would have kept drifting. With it, we live intentionally. Emily once told me something that stays with me. If you had just forgiven us without consequence, she said, I would have learned that love means you can treat someone poorly and they'll stay. She's right. Children learn how to love by how they're loved. By how boundaries are enforced. By how dignity is modeled. We are closer now than we ever were in that big house. Not because we erased the past, but because we confronted it. I no longer fear being excluded. Because I no longer tolerate environments where I am merely tolerated. That's the quiet power of growth. And every Christmas since, when I stand in whatever kitchen we gather in, sometimes mine, sometimes theirs, occasionally even Beatrice's, I feel something steady beneath my feet. Not marble floors. Not expensive rugs, foundation. Reinforced with respect. Paid for not with money, but with courage. And that is worth more than any house I ever owned. There is something about watching a child become a teenager that forces you to confront the past in new ways. Sarah is 15 now. 15 is sharp edges and strong opinions and doors that close a little louder than necessary. It is independence testing its wings. It is vulnerability disguised as certainty. One afternoon she came to my condo alone, not for cookies, not for a school project, just alone. Grandma, she said, sitting at my kitchen table the way her mother once did, can I ask you something serious? You always can. She hesitated. Mom told me more about the house. Ah. Time reveals stories in layers. And? I asked gently. She said you sold it 'cause you were being treated badly. That's true. She said it almost broke everything. That's also true. Sarah traced a finger along the grain of the table. Were you scared? The honesty of that question caught me. Yes, I said. Off losing Mom? Less. Then why did you still do it? I leaned back, considering how much truth a 15-year-old could hold. Because if I didn't, I would have lost myself. She absorbed that. Is that worse? Less. She looked at me for a long moment. Mom says that was the moment she learned what boundaries mean. I smiled softly. I'm glad she did. Sarah nodded. I think I need to learn that too. Teenage friendships can be brutal. I didn't need details to understand. As someone crossed one, I asked. She nodded faintly. I keep letting it slide because I don't want drama. Comfort over confrontation. The pattern echoes through generations unless someone breaks it. Do you remember the story of the red dress? I asked. She smiled slightly. She had always liked that part. You wore red like a superhero. I chuckled. I didn't feel like a superhero. I felt like I might faint. No. Why? Because sometimes your legs shake and you walk anyway. She looked at me with something like admiration, but deeper. Not idolizing. Understanding. Okay. She said quietly. Then I think I know what I have to do. Watching her walk out that afternoon, I felt a strange mix of pride and ache. Courage is inherited not genetically, but by example. A week later she called me. I did what? I told her to stop, and when she rolled her eyes, I told her if she keeps treating me like that, we're not friends. And she said I was overreacting. That's common. I said maybe. But I'm not changing my mind. I smiled into the phone. What happened next? She hasn't texted. There was a pause. I feel weavied, I suggested. Yeah. Good. Boundaries feel uncomfortable before they feel peaceful. Emily called me that night. Whatever you tell her worked. She said. I didn't tell her anything new. You modeled it. That word again. Modeling. Not preaching, not rescuing, living it. The true test of growth isn't in calm seasons. It's when history tempts repetition. And history did tempt us once more. When Sarah was 16, Beatrice decided to sell her estate. Downsize, reposition assets. She invited the family over to discuss legacy planning. The word made me cautious. We sat in her now familiar living room. The grand piano still gleamed. The art still hung precisely. I've been thinking about the future, she began. Jason shifted slightly beside Emily. I want to make things right, she continued. No one spoke. She cleared her throat. I can't undo the past, but I can adjust what comes next. She outlined a revised estate plan, transparent, no conditional trusteeships, no control clauses, equal distributions, educational funds managed independently. No strings. It was different from before, significantly. Jason looked at her carefully. What changed? He asked. Beatrice glanced briefly at me. I realized that money without trust builds nothing lasting. Silence settled over the room. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. But it was honest. Later, as we stood near the doorway preparing to leave, she approached me quietly. You never asked for an apology, she said. No. Because you weren't ready to give one. She studied my face. I am now. Simple. Unadorned. I'm sorry, she said. Not for losing influence. Not for how she treated me. I nodded. Thank you. Forgiveness didn't flood the room with light. It simply removed a shadow. We shook hands. This time her grip was warm. Years have passed since that red dress Christmas. The story has become part of our family mythology. Not as scandal. As lesson. At Sarah's high school graduation party, someone joked about the infamous house. Sarah laughed. That house wasn't the point, she said casually. The lesson was. I caught Emily's eye across the yard. She mouthed, thank you. I shook my head slightly. We both knew it wasn't about gratitude anymore. It was about growth. Now, in the quiet of my condo, I sometimes sit by the window. I reflect on the woman I was before all of this. The one who equated love with limitless giving. The one who believed silence was strength. The one who thought endurance would earn appreciation. She wasn't weak. She was misinformed. There's a difference. Strength without boundaries becomes self-erasure. Generosity without respect becomes exploitation. Love without courage becomes martyrdom. I no longer live that way. And because I don't, neither does my daughter, nor my granddaughter. That is the true inheritance. Not money, not property, but posture, the ability to stand upright in your own life. If I had to summarize everything that Christmas Eve gave me, it would be this. It forced honesty. Honesty about how I was being treated. Honesty about what I was tolerating. Honesty about what I deserved. And once you are honest with yourself, you cannot unknow it. You cannot return to shrinking. The house in Bellevue is long gone from memory. But the moment I handed over that envelope, that moment lives quietly inside me. Not as revenge. As reclamation. And every time I say no when I need to. Every time Emily protects her home. Every time Sarah draws a line without apology. That red dress Christmas lives on. Not as scandal. As strength. And that is more than enough. Time has a way of circling back. Not to test you the same way, but to show you how much you've changed. When Sarah left for college, the house felt quieter than any season before it. Not empty, just expanded. Like space had been added to the air. She chose a university 3 states away. Far enough to grow. She told us. Close enough to come home. That sounded like something Emily would say. Or maybe something she learned to say. The night before Sarah left, the 3 of us sat on my balcony. The city lights below flickered softly. Late summer air. Still warm. Grandma, she said suddenly, if you hadn't sold the house, do you think everything would have turned out differently? Yes, I said without hesitation. Worse. Less. Emily looked at me carefully. You're sure? I'm sure. Sarah pulled her knees to her chest. Why? Because resentment would have settled in, I said. And resentment doesn't stay quiet, it leaks, into tone. Into patience, into love. Emily inhaled slowly. She knew that was true. I might have stayed, I continued, but I would have become smaller. Bitter, maybe passive-aggressive. Maybe distant. Sarah wrinkled her nose. You passive-aggressive. I smiled. Even grandmothers are human. There was a pause. Instead, I said, we learned how to confront things before they rot. Sarah nodded slowly. I think a lot of families don't. They don't. Emily agreed. The next morning, when we hugged her goodbye at the airport, I felt the familiar tremor in my chest. The same one I felt the night I handed over that envelope years ago. Fear not of loss. Of change. But I've learned something about fear. It is rarely a stop sign. More often, it's a doorway. Freshman year was not easy for Sarah. Roommate Tencher. A boy who mistook charm for character. One evening she called me in tears. He says I'm too intense. She said. That I make everything a boundary talk. I leaned back in my chair. And how does that make you feel? Like maybe I am. Are you asking for respect? Yes. Are you asking for honesty? Yes. Are you asking to be treated kindly? Yes. Then you are not too intense, silence. Then a shaky breath. He says relationships require compromise. They do. So how do I know the difference? There's a difference between compromise and erosion. I said gently. Erosion chips behavior. Erosion chips away at identity. That landed. I don't want to erode, she whispered. Then don't. A week later she ended it. Not angrily, calmly, and calmly is powerful. That Thanksgiving she came home different. Taller in her posture. Clearer in her postige. Beatrice was there too. Age had softened her further. Time humbles everyone eventually. At dinner, Sarah found herself seated beside her. Grandma B, she said, can I ask you something? Beatrice smiled faintly. Of course. Did you ever have to learn boundaries late in life? The table quieted slightly. Beatrice looked down at her plate for a moment. Yes, she said. And it's harder when you've practiced control for decades. Sarah tilted her head. Was it worth learning? Beatrice glanced at me. Yes, she said. It saved my relationship with your parents. Then, after a small pause. And with Margaret. No tension followed the statement. No sharp glances. Just truth laid plainly on the table beside the cranberry sauce. Later that evening, while we wrapped leftovers, Beatrice touched my arm lightly. She's strong, she said. She is. You did that. I corrected. But privately I knew something. Strength multiplies when someone models it first. A few years passed. Sarah graduated with honors in psychology. I want to help people break patterns, she told us. I almost laughed at the poetry of it. She now works with young women navigating family dynamics, self-worth, relationship cycles. Sometimes she calls me after sessions. I see you in their stories, she told me once. In which way? In the way they don't realize they're shrinking. That word again. Shrinking. It seems to follow generations of women like a quiet inheritance. But so does expansion. On my 17th birthday, the whole family gathered in Emily and Jason's home, the townhouse that once felt temporary. It doesn't feel temporary anymore, it feels lived in. Or peaceful. During the toast, Jason surprised me. I used to think stability came from assets, he said. Investments. Properties, planning, he looked at me. But I learned that stability comes from integrity. Emily squeezed his hand. And from courage, she added. Sarah raised her glass last. To Grandma, she said, smiling. Who taught us that sometimes the bravest investment is walking away? Laughter followed. Unforced, later that night, after everyone left, I stood alone in their kitchen. The countertops weren't marble. The lighting wasn't dramatic. There was a small crack near the edge of the backsplash. But the room was full of history. Not inherited wealth. Earned wisdom. I ran my fingers lightly along the counter, and thought about the woman I was decades ago. The one who thought keeping peace meant swallowing discomfort. The one who believed generosity required self-sacrifice without limit. She did her best with what she knew. But I am grateful she learned more. Because learning more changed everything. If I could speak to her now, the version of me standing in that red dress, heart pounding, I would say, you are not destroying your family. You are redefining it. You are not choosing dignity. You are not walking away from love. You are demanding that love stand upright, and love did. It stood. It adjusted. That's the part no one tells you. Boundaries don't always end relationships. Sometimes they rescue them. And now as I sit here, older, steadier, softer in some places and stronger in others, I understand something fully. The house was never the legacy. The courage was. And courage, when modeled with love, doesn't divide a family. It rebuilds one. From the inside out. The years after that felt less like chapters and more like seasons passing quietly. There were no more confrontations worth writing about. No more legal papers sliding across tables. No more Christmases marked by tension. Life became ordinary in the best possible way. Sarah married at 28. Not in a grand estate. Not in a hotel ballroom. In a botanical garden that smelled faintly of rain and jasmine. Her partner was a man who spoke slowly, listened carefully, and once told me, I am not here to fix her. I am here to walk beside her. I liked him immediately. During the ceremony when the officiant spoke about partnership, I thought about everything we had learned as a family. Power is not love. Dependency is not devotion. Control is not care. Love is choosing to stay while still being free to leave. When Sarah said her vows, she added one line that made Emily cry quietly beside me. I promise to protect my peace and yours. Simple, powerful. After the wedding, Beatrice approached me. Age had softened her even further now. Her movements were slower, but her eyes remained sharp in the way old intelligence does. You raised a remarkable woman, she said. She raised herself too. She nodded. True. We stood near the garden fountain for a moment. You were right about many things, she said. And you were right about some things too. I replied. She smiled faintly. That is probably the best outcome two stubborn women can hope for. I agreed. Not friendship, not erasure. Understanding. Time later, Sarah and her husband announced they were expecting. Emily burst into tears of joy when she heard. Another girl, she said. Are you sure? I asked teasingly. She laughed. I just feel it. And she was right. When little Clara was born, I held her in the hospital room, while sunlight filtered through pale blue curtains. She was small and warm and astonishingly peaceful. New life always feels sacred. Emily stood beside me quietly. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't sold the house? She asked. What do you think? I think we would still love each other, I said. But differently. And not as honestly. She nodded slowly. I think I would have stayed dependent, she said. And angry without understanding why. We watched the baby sleep. I'm glad you did it, she whispered. So am I. That night, driving home alone, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Not victory. Not revenge, not even closure. Completion. The house in Bellevue exists now only as a memory. Not as trauma, not as triumph, just a turning point. People sometimes ask me if I regret the pain that came with that decision. The answer is complicated. Pain is not always the enemy. Sometimes pain is the teacher that refuses to be ignored. I regret the hurt. And I do not regret the lesson. Because without that Christmas Eve, I might still be the woman who believed love meant disappearing quietly. Instead, I learned something deeper. Love is not measured by how much you give. It is measured by how well you preserve the humanity of the people you love, including yourself. Emily visits me every Sunday now. We cook together. Sometimes she still asks my opinion about life decisions, but not in a way that seeks permission. In a way that seeks perspective. That is the healthiest form of intergenerational relationship I know. Last week, while cutting vegetables, she said, "Mom, I think Sarah is going to teach her children the same thing you taught me." "What's that?" "That love is not obedience." I smiled. "Yes," I said. "I hope so, because obedience belongs to authority. Love belongs to freedom. And freedom requires boundaries. As I grow older, my world has shrunk in physical distance. I travel less. I move slower. But my emotional world feels larger than ever. Because I am no longer afraid of losing people simply because I say no. That is a gift I never knew I wanted. On quiet nights, I sit by my window and watch the city breathe. I think about Thomas sometimes. I think he would have been proud of how I learned to stand. He used to say, "Maggie, you have a heart big enough to drown in if you don't learn to swim." I finally learned to swim. And I am still here. Not because I endured everything, but because I chose what I would endure. That is the final wisdom I wish to leave behind. You do not prove love by erasing yourself. You prove love by standing fully human, flawed, brave, bounded, and free. The Christmas Eve that once felt like destruction became the seed of something stronger. Not reconciliation alone. Not revenge. But restoration. And now, when I hear laughter in my home, from my daughter, my granddaughter, and my great-grandchildren playing together, I understand something quietly beautiful. The house I sold was just walls. The home we built afterward was people. And people, when loved wisely, are the only foundation that truly lasts. The last decade of my life has been slower. Not sad. Not empty, just quieter in the way mountains are quiet. Age softens ambition. It does not erase it. It changes its shape. I am 82 now. My hair is mostly silver, though Emily insists the silver makes me look distinguished rather than old. Sarah visits with Clara every Saturday. Clara is 7. She has inherited curiosity and Emily's stubborn analytical streak. And perhaps, a little of my quiet observation. Last week Clara asked me a question while sitting beside my reading chair. "Great-grandma," she said, swinging her legs slightly, "was Christmas Eve really scary?" I thought about that night. The door, the envelope, the shocked faces inside the warm, decorated room that was once my house. "Yes," I said. "Before or after you were brave?" The question surprised me. "Buff," I said honestly. She nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Mummy says being brave means doing the scary thing even when you're sad. Emily teaches well." Clara thought about this. "Did you win?" I smiled. "I don't think it was about winning." "What was it about?" "About not disappearing." She processed that slowly. Then she asked the question children eventually ask when they are ready for deeper truth. "Would you do it again?" I did not answer immediately. I remembered the rain that night. The red dress. The weight of the legal envelope. The tremor in my hands that I hid from everyone. "Yes," I said finally, "even if Mom was mad." "Yes, even if you were alone." "Yes." She considered that. "Then I think you were very brave." Praise from children is pure. It carries no agenda. Later that evening, after everyone had left, Emily sat beside me on the balcony. The city lights were softer now. Older buildings replaced by newer ones. "Do you ever feel lonely?" she asked. She is direct like Thomas used to be. I thought about it. "Yes," I said. "Not often." "No." "What changed?" I smiled. "I stopped believing loneliness was punishment." She nodded slowly. "That's probably the wisest thing you ever taught me." We sat in silence for a while. Then she said something unexpected. "Mom, I was thinking about inheritance." I waited. "I don't want to leave money to Sarah someday as the main gift." "Then what do you want to leave?" "Education. Emotional tools." I felt warmth spread quietly through my chest. "You are already doing that." She leaned her head on my shoulder briefly. "Thank you for not letting me grow up thinking love means sacrifice until nothing is left." I closed my eyes. That was the hardest thing I ever did. I believe her generation will be better at this than mine. They speak about boundaries openly. They are less ashamed of saying no. Perhaps that is the true legacy of that Christmas. Not the house. Not the sale, but the permission to be human. Beatrice died 3 years ago. The funeral was small and dignified. Jason spoke about her determination. Emily spoke about complexity. I placed a single white rose on the casket. Not forgiveness. Not anger. Just acknowledgement that her story mattered, even if it was difficult. After the service, Sarah said quietly, "People can change late, can't they?" "Yes," I said. "If they are willing." Did Grandma B change? A little, is that enough? I thought about that. For a lifetime. Sometimes a little is all anyone gets. The world is not made of perfect transformations, it is made of incremental healing. Now, as I sit here writing this in my notebook, because old habits die slowly, I want to leave one final message for whoever reads this story. You will meet people who love you but do not know how to respect you. You will meet people who expect sacrifice without gratitude. You will be tempted to believe that endurance is virtue. It is not. Virtue is choosing love that does not require your disappearance. If love asks you to shrink, it is not love. If love requires silence about your pain, it is not love. If love survives only when you finance it, it is not love. True love grows stronger when you stand fully in your humanity. I lost a daughter for a season. And found her again. Not because I chased her. But because I stopped chasing approval. That is the miracle I carry. Outside my window, winter is coming again. Every year the lights appear earlier. Every year, the city feels older. And every year, our family gathers, not because we must, but because we choose to. On Christmas Eve, we still light the tree. There is no private gathering. There is no exclusion. There is only the quiet understanding that love is strongest when it is freely given and respectfully received. And sometimes, the most loving sentence a mother can speak is very simple. No, not like that. Because from that small word grows everything else. And that is how a house became a home. The day I turned 85, I woke up earlier than usual. Old age has a different rhythm, sleep is lighter. Memories visit without invitation. I sat in my favorite chair by the window, and watched the morning light touch the rooftops of the city I have lived in for decades. Emily came at noon with lunch. Spaghetti again. It has become our unofficial family comfort food. Grandma Clara said, sitting cross-legged on the floor, "I wrote a story for school." "Oh, about what?" "About a woman who was very kind but people didn't treat her nicely. Then she learned to say no." I smiled. Did she live happily ever after? Clara thought about it. She lived honestly ever after. That phrase stayed with me. Honestly ever after. Not perfectly. Not without pain. But without pretending. After lunch, Emily helped me water the small balcony garden I keep now. It has lavender and one's bush that refuses to die. "Mom," she said suddenly, "do you think you were right to make that decision all those years ago?" I knew what she meant. The Christmas Eve decision. The sale. The eviction notice. The fracture that followed. "Yes," I said. Even knowing how much it hurt me at the time. "Yes." She nodded slowly. "I used to be angry about it." She admitted, "No. Now I think it saved us." Silence settled gently between us. "Do you know what I fear most now?" she asked. "What?" "That I might repeat your mistake in reverse." I raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "Be giving too much to Sarah's future children because I don't want them to feel what I felt." "Ah, the generational pendulum." I placed my hand over hers. "Moderation," I said quietly, "is the highest form of wisdom." She exhaled slowly. Later that evening, after everyone left, I received a phone call. Unknown number. I answered anyway. It was Jason's younger sister. Beatrice's daughter. She spoke carefully. "Margaret, I wanted to tell you something." "Yes." "Mother used to talk about you near the end." I waited. "She said you were the only person she ever met who could walk away without hatred." I didn't respond immediately. She said she respected that even if she never learned to do it herself. I felt something quiet and warm settle inside my chest. Respect, even posthumous, is a strange kind of reconciliation. After hanging up, I sat by the window long into the night. I thought about the woman I was at 45. Terrified of losing my daughter. Terrified of being alone. Terrified of conflict. That woman would not recognize me now. She would be surprised that strength does not require hardness. That dignity does not require hostility. That love can exist with distance. Clara visited me the next morning. She brought her school report. A full in literature, she announced proudly. What did you learn? That stories are about what people learn, not just what happens. I laughed softly. Your teacher is wise. She climbed into my lap. Grandma, will our family always be like this? I knew what she meant. The boundaries. The warmth without fear. I hope so, I said. What if someone is mean again? Then we will do what we did before. What is that? Speak the truth kindly. Set the boundary clearly, and walk away if we must. She nodded seriously. Okay. Children accept simple rules. Adults complicate them. When night came, I wrote this final thought in my notebook. I did not win a battle against my daughter's mother-in-law. I won something more fragile and more valuable. I won the right to be treated with dignity inside my own love. If you remember nothing else from this story, remember this. Love is not how much you endure. Love is how much truth your relationship can survive. The Christmas Eve that once felt like betrayal became the seed of 3 generations learning the same lesson. Emily learned not to fear confrontation. Sarah learned not to fear boundaries. Clara will grow up believing that kindness and self-respect are not opposites. And I, an old woman watching winter approach, learned the final truth. You do not need to suffer to prove you love someone. You only need to stand fully human beside them. The house in Bellevue is gone. But the home we built afterward is alive in laughter, in small tables, in honest conversations, in grandchildren who know how to say both, I love you, and, no, not like that. The snow will fall again this year. We will decorate the tree. We will cook food that is slightly too much. We will laugh too loudly sometimes. And when someone asks me what I am proudest of in my life, I will answer. Not the money I had, not the property I owned. Not the revenge I executed. But the moment I learned that love grows stronger when it is protected by boundaries. And that is the story I leave behind. I am 90 now. Time moves differently at 90. Days are softer. The world outside still changes, new buildings rise, technology evolves, children speak differently. But inside my world has become quiet and wide like a late ocean. Sarah visits every week when she can. She is a mother now, 2 daughters. Clara has grown into a young woman studying psychology, following her mother's footsteps. Family patterns, once broken, tend to reshape themselves into healthier forms, when someone is brave enough to interrupt them. Last Christmas Eve, we gathered again. The tradition continues. Not because of obligation, but because we want to remember how far we have come. The townhouse dining table is larger now because the family has grown. There are children's drawings taped to the refrigerator. The smell of roasting goose is still there. Some things remain constant. During dinner, little Lily, Sarah's youngest daughter, asked me, Great-grandma, were you ever a queen? The table went quiet for a moment. I smiled. No, I said. But I learned how to stand like one. She considered this seriously. Did people listen when you stood like that? Some did. What about the others? I didn't need them to. Later that night, when everyone was packing leftovers into containers, Emily sat beside me. Her hair is now completely silver. She looks beautiful in a way that reminds me of winter light. Mom, she said quietly, I think our family is finally safe. I looked at her. Safety is not the absence of conflict. Safety is the presence of respect. Yes, I said. I think it is. Snow began falling gently. Clara helped Sarah hang ornaments on the tree. Jason was arguing lightly with his son-in-law about football statistics. Children were laughing. Someone spilled cranberry sauce and immediately cleaned it. No tension. Just life. Emily took my hand. Thank you, she said. For what? For teaching me that love is not endurance. I squeezed her hand. You taught me to, I replied. What did I teach you? That it is never too late to stop shrinking. We sat together watching the snow cover the city quietly. I know my time is nearing its natural end. Not with sadness, but with completion. If there is one message I leave for the world, it is this. Do not measure love by how much you suffer for it. Measure love by how freely you can be yourself inside it. Do not fear saying no. Do not fear losing people who require your silence. Because the people who belong in your life will not ask you to disappear to make them comfortable. And when you are old, like me, sitting near a window watching winter fall softly across a city that has lived inside your heart for decades, you will understand something beautiful. The greatest inheritance you can give your family is not money. It is the courage to stand tall in your own life. I close my notebook now. The children are singing Christmas songs downstairs. The lights on the tree are warm and soft. And somewhere in the quiet space between memory and tomorrow, I hear Thomas say, as he used to, Maggie, you learned to swim. Yes, I did, and I am still here. The last entry in my notebook is written in handwriting that has begun to tremble slightly. Not from fear, from age, from time. It reads, if I am remembered at all, I hope it is not as a woman who sold a house. Not as a woman who stood in a doorway on Christmas Eve. Not as a woman who enforced boundaries with legal documents. But as a woman who learned that love and dignity must walk side by side. This morning, I woke before the sun. At nearly 2, waking early is no longer unusual. The city outside is quiet under winter air. Snow rests gently on the balcony railing beside my lavender plant, which still refuses to die. Emily visited. She brought hot tea. We sat without speaking for a long time. Words are no longer necessary between us, Mom, she said finally. Sarah is thinking of writing a book about our family. I smiled. About boundaries and love. I nodded slowly. Then the story continues, I said. Yes. She helped me stand and walk slowly to the window. Down below I could see children playing in the courtyard. Lily was chasing her sister through snow that had begun to fall again. Generations repeat joy as much as pain. That is nature's quiet mercy. You are not afraid of dying, are you? Emily asked suddenly. I thought about it. No, I said. Why? Because I have loved and I have been loved back without having to disappear. She hugged me gently, carefully, as if I were made of fragile winter light. That evening, when the family gathered dinner, Sarah stood and raised a glass. To Grandma Margaret, she said. For teaching us that love is strongest when it is free. The children repeated the toast in their own way, clumsy, happy, loud. I sat in my chair beside the window and watched them. I do not know how many winters I have left. But I know this, the house in Bellevue is gone. The conflict is history. The pain has softened into wisdom. And what remains is something far more valuable than property. A family that knows how to love without erasing itself. The snow continued falling, softly, quietly, like forgiveness that does not need to be spoken. And somewhere in the deep silence of age, I felt Thomas's presence in the way memory sometimes feels like breathing, not as loss, but as completion. The story does not end, it simply rests, like winter soil waiting for spring. The morning I did not wake up came quietly. There was no dramatic last breath. No grand farewell speech. No unfinished conversation. Just the softness of winter sunlight touching the curtains beside my bed. The lavender plant on the balcony had survived another year. Emily found the notebook first. She read the last entry silently. Then she sat beside me for a long time, holding my hand. The family gathered slowly. The way families do when they feel without being told. Sarah cried quietly. Clara placed a small white rose beside the notebook. Little Lily asked, "Is Grandma sleeping?" Sarah said softly. "She is resting." Outside, snow began falling again, not heavy, not violent, just patient. The townhouse dining table was prepared for Christmas Eve dinner. There were empty chairs, not because someone was missing, but because presence is sometimes felt even in absence. Later, Emily spoke at the window where I used to sit. Mom taught us something very simple. She said, that love does not require suffering. That dignity is not selfish. That boundaries are kindness. Jason placed a hand on her shoulder. Clara opened the notebook to the page where I had written, do not shrink, love loudly, live honestly, protect your peace. The city lights flickered softly below like distant stars resting on earth. And somewhere in the quiet mathematics of memory, a mother who learned to say no finally found the home she had been building all her life. Not in property. Not in revenge. Not even in reconciliation. But in the generations who would walk taller, because one woman refused to disappear. The Christmas tree lights continued glowing through the night. Warm. Small. Enduring. Like love that has learned its boundaries,